Have you ever felt completely drained after constantly giving, always saying yes, and never setting limits? Have you ever wondered why, despite your best intentions, your kindness sometimes leads to exhaustion rather than fulfillment? If so, you're not alone. Society teaches us that kindness is always good, that we should help without hesitation, give without questioning, and put others before ourselves at all costs. But what if this belief is misguided? What if instead of bringing harmony, unfiltered kindness leads to imbalance, resentment, and suffering? The Buddha himself understood this paradox. In Buddhist teachings, compassion, karuṇā, loving kindness, mettā, and generosity, dāna, are essential virtues on the path to enlightenment. However, they are not meant to stand alone. They must be balanced with wisdom, vipassanā, and discernment, paññā. True kindness does not mean being a doormat, nor does it require us to sacrifice our own well-being for the sake of others. It means knowing when to give, how to give, and when to walk away. So, should you stop being kind? No. But you must learn how to be wisely kind. In the pages ahead, we will explore the middle path between boundless compassion and self-preservation. Through Buddhist wisdom, real-life stories, and practical insights, we will uncover the secret to being kind without being taken advantage of, to giving without depletion, and to loving without losing yourself. Let's begin. 1. The balance between compassion and wisdom. The Buddha was the embodiment of compassion, yet he never allowed others to take advantage of his kindness. He healed, he taught, and he guided, but he also knew when to remain silent, when to walk away, and when to refuse requests. One of the most telling stories from Buddhist scripture is that of the poisoned arrow. A man was struck by a poisoned arrow and refused treatment until he knew who shot it, what kind of wood it was made from, and what type of poison was used. The Buddha explained that insisting on knowing these details would lead to his death. Instead, he should focus on what mattered, removing the arrow and healing. Imagine someone drowning in a river, flailing wildly, calling out for help. A passerby, moved by compassion, jumps in without hesitation. But instead of helping, the drowning person clings onto them in desperation, pulling them both underwater. This is what happens when kindness is given without wisdom. We may intend to help, but if we are not careful, we can both be dragged down by the weight of another's suffering. In another story, a generous monk, known for his boundless kindness, welcomed everyone who came to him for help. He provided food, shelter, and guidance without question. At first, his monastery flourished as a haven for those in need, but over time, he noticed a pattern. Certain individuals returned time and time again, taking but never giving, draining the resources meant to uplift all. Eventually, the monastery fell into disrepair, no longer able to serve those who truly needed its aid. His kindness, though noble, lacked discernment. These stories illustrate the fundamental truth. Compassion must be paired with wisdom. Giving endlessly without awareness of consequences does not create harmony, it creates exhaustion. True compassion requires balance. It is about understanding when to give and when to step back, when to offer help, and when to allow someone to face their own lessons. The Buddha himself did not heal everyone who crossed his path, nor did he engage in endless debates with those who were not ready to listen. He understood the deeper truth, that forcing kindness where it is not valued does not create growth, but rather dependency and imbalance. So before you extend your kindness, ask yourself, will my actions truly help this person, or am I simply enabling their harmful behavior? Does this act of giving empower them, or does it create a cycle where they remain dependent and unaccountable for their own growth? The Buddha encouraged wise compassion, compassion that uplifts rather than depletes, compassion that nourishes rather than enables. The middle path, the heart of Buddhist wisdom, teaches that extremes are not sustainable. Kindness without wisdom leads to exhaustion. Wisdom without kindness leads to cold detachment. It is only when these two qualities walk hand in hand that true transformation can occur. 2. The danger of people-pleasing and attachment. One of the core teachings of Buddhism is an mettā, the doctrine of non-self. This means that attachment to identity, whether as a kind person or a helpful friend, can lead to suffering. Many people struggle with people-pleasing, believing that their worth is tied to how much they do for others. However, when kindness becomes a means of seeking approval, it is no longer true kindness, it is attachment. We all know someone who bends over backward to make others happy, even at the cost of their own well-being. Perhaps we have been that person, saying yes when we want to say no, taking on responsibilities that are not ours to bear, and constantly seeking validation through our acts of service. But is this true kindness? Or is it a mask for our own fear of rejection? A well-known Zen story illustrates this beautifully. A young monk carried a woman across a river, though monks were not supposed to touch women. His companion was shocked and spent hours criticizing him. The young monk simply replied, "I put her down on the other side of the river. Why are you still carrying her?" This story highlights the importance of letting go. If you find yourself feeling resentful, exhausted, or unappreciated for your kindness, you may be holding on to an unhealthy attachment to being the good person. True kindness does not seek validation. It simply arises from wisdom. Consider a woman who spends her entire life taking care of others, her children, her friends, her colleagues, yet deep down she feels empty. She has never set boundaries, never said no, never prioritized her own needs. And then one day, she wakes up feeling drained, realizing that all her giving has left her with nothing for herself. This is the burden of attachment, disguised as kindness. The Buddha taught that attachment leads to suffering. When we become attached to the idea of being a kind person, we fear losing that identity. We give not out of genuine compassion, but out of a subconscious need to be liked, to be appreciated, to be seen as good. And in doing so, we trap ourselves in a cycle of exhaustion and self-neglect. Does this mean we should stop being kind? Of course not. But it does mean that we must learn to give from a place of inner abundance, rather than from a place of insecurity. True kindness comes from strength, not from fear. It is an offering, not an obligation. Wisdom in action. Ask yourself, am I helping because it is truly needed, or because I fear rejection? If your kindness is driven by anxiety, it may be time to step back and reevaluate. Being kind should feel fulfilling, not depleting. Letting go of people-pleasing does not mean becoming selfish. It means understanding that we are not responsible for making everyone happy. It means setting boundaries, prioritizing our own well-being, and recognizing that sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do is to allow others to solve their own problems. The Dalai Lama once said, "Be kind whenever possible. It is always possible." But remember, kindness does not mean servitude. It does not mean abandoning yourself to meet the endless demands of others. It means acting with wisdom, knowing when to give and when to step back, when to help and when to let go. True kindness, rooted in wisdom, is not exhausting. It is liberating. It is not about pleasing others. It is about being aligned with truth, with balance, with the middle way. The next time you feel the urge to say yes, pause and ask yourself, is this an act of love, or is it an act of fear? If your answer is the latter, then perhaps it is time to set yourself free. 3. When to walk away. The Buddha's boundaries. Not all who seek help genuinely wish to change. Some seek only to take advantage. The Buddha himself encountered many individuals who tried to manipulate him, yet he remained unwavering in his purpose. Consider the story of Devadatta, the Buddha's cousin, who sought power for himself. He attempted to undermine the Buddha, even plotting to kill him. The Buddha, however, did not allow Devadatta's schemes to distract him from his mission. He did not waste time trying to win him over or change his heart. He simply moved forward, undeterred. This teaches us an important lesson. Not everyone who smiles at you has good intentions. Some people drain your energy, manipulate your goodwill, and take without giving. Buddhism encourages us to act with compassion, but also to recognize when it is time to step away. Imagine a farmer who diligently tends to his crops, ensuring they have water, sunlight, and nutrients. Yet, there are weeds growing among them, sapping the soil of its strength. If he does not pull these weeds out, they will eventually choke the very plants he has worked so hard to nurture. Similarly, in life, if we do not set boundaries, those who take advantage of our kindness will continue to drain us until we have nothing left to give. Walking away is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of wisdom. When someone continuously takes without giving, when they demand but never reciprocate, they are not valuing your kindness. They are exploiting it. There is no virtue in allowing oneself to be depleted for the sake of maintaining an illusion of harmony. Take, for example, a friend who only reaches out when they need something. They never check on you, never offer their presence in your time of need, yet expect you to be available whenever they call. At what point do you recognize that this is not a friendship, but a transaction? Buddhism teaches that all relationships should be based on mutual respect and balance. Giving and receiving should flow naturally, like the rhythm of the tides. If you find yourself constantly giving and rarely receiving, it may be time to step back and reassess. Even the Buddha himself withdrew from those who refused to listen. He spoke to those who were open, who sought wisdom, and who were ready to receive his teachings. But he did not waste energy arguing with those whose minds were closed. He understood that not everyone is ready to change, and that forcing wisdom upon the unwilling is futile. Wisdom in action. If a relationship is one-sided, where you are always giving and never receiving, consider whether staying involved aligns with the Buddhist principle of right action, samma kammanta. Ask yourself, am I nurturing this connection, or am I merely allowing myself to be drained? The path of wisdom is not about cutting people off hastily, but about discerning when your presence is truly beneficial. If someone repeatedly takes advantage of your goodwill, it is not your duty to fix them. Sometimes, the greatest lesson we can give others is the lesson of absence, allowing them to see the value of what they have lost. Let go with compassion, but also with clarity. Walking away is not a failure. It is an affirmation that your energy is sacred and that your kindness should be treasured, not exploited. 4. The illusion of obligations, freeing yourself from guilt. A common reason people continue being overly kind is guilt. If I don't help, who will? They ask themselves. But Buddhism teaches that suffering arises from clinging to ideas, to roles, to expectations. Many of us carry an invisible burden, the feeling that we must be the one to fix everything, to step in whenever there is need, to never turn away. This illusion of obligation can weigh so heavily upon us that we begin to lose ourselves in it, mistaking exhaustion for virtue and sacrifice for necessity. Imagine a man drowning, and another man jumps in to save him. But instead of helping, the drowning man clings desperately to the rescuer, pulling them both under. If both drown, who is helped? The truth is, if we deplete ourselves trying to help everyone, we will have nothing left to give to those who truly need it. A mother once said, I spent my whole life making sure my children had everything they needed. But one day, I realized I had nothing left for myself. And the saddest part, they had learned to expect my sacrifices without appreciating them. This is what happens when kindness turns into obligation, when giving becomes an unspoken demand rather than a heartfelt choice. The Dalai Lama once said, "Compassion is not religious business, it is human business. It is not luxury, it is essential. But compassion must be paired with wisdom. Just as a tree cannot grow strong if all its nutrients are drained from the soil, we cannot continue giving if we never replenish ourselves. Let go of the idea that you must always be the savior. Instead, recognize that your role is to offer help where it is meaningful, not to exhaust yourself trying to please everyone. There is no spiritual merit in burnout. True kindness comes from a place of strength, not self-sacrifice. Wisdom in action. The next time you feel obligated to help, pause. Ask yourself, am I acting from guilt or from true compassion? If it is guilt, let it go. You are not responsible for carrying the burdens of the entire world. Offer your kindness where it uplifts, and do not let the illusion of obligation steal your peace. 5. Practical steps to cultivating wise compassion. So, how can we practice kindness without being taken advantage of? Here are a few key principles to help integrate wisdom into your compassion. Set boundaries with confidence. Just as the Buddha withdrew to meditate, you must also take time for yourself. Saying no is not selfish, it is self-preservation. A river with no banks spills everywhere. It is the boundaries that allow it to flow with purpose. Be clear about your limits and respect them. Observe without judgment. Before committing to helping someone, observe their patterns. Do they genuinely seek solutions, or are they trapped in a cycle of dependency? True help uplifts, but misplaced help can create more harm than good. Sometimes, the most compassionate act is allowing someone to find their own strength. Help mindfully and purposefully. Offer assistance that empowers rather than enables. Instead of giving money to someone who misuses it, provide resources, guidance, or education. Instead of fixing problems for others, help them cultivate the skills to solve them themselves. Prioritize your inner peace. Your kindness should bring joy, not exhaustion. If helping someone repeatedly leaves you feeling depleted, reconsider your involvement. You are not obligated to give beyond your capacity. Your well-being matters too. Practice detachment and non-attachment to outcomes. Be kind without being attached to results. True giving expects nothing in return. When you let go of the need for recognition or reciprocity, your kindness becomes lighter, freer, and more genuine. By practicing these principles, you cultivate wise compassion, one that nurtures both yourself and others rather than depleting you. The goal is not to stop being kind, but to be kind in a way that is sustainable, nourishing, and wise. Kindness is a powerful force, but like all things, it must be tempered with wisdom. If kindness depletes you, if it leaves you feeling used, resentful, or unappreciated, then it is no longer true compassion. It is self-sacrifice at the cost of your well-being. The Buddha never taught us to abandon kindness, but rather to refine it, to balance it, and to ensure it serves the greater good, rather than becoming a tool for manipulation or self-inflicted suffering. There is an old parable of a candle that burns too brightly, giving light to all around it, but eventually melting away to nothing. Kindness without wisdom is like that candle. It burns hot and fast, but it does not last. However, a well-maintained lantern, protected from the wind and fueled steadily, can illuminate the darkness for much longer. Your kindness should be like that lantern, sustainable, steady, and nourishing to both yourself and others. The middle way, as taught by the Buddha, is about balance, avoiding extremes in all aspects of life. This includes how we give to others. Giving too much can leave us empty, while withholding too much can make us disconnected and cold. The key is discernment, knowing when to help, when to let go, when to stand firm and when to walk away. Not everyone is ready to receive the help we offer, and not every relationship deserves our continued investment. Recognizing this truth is not a sign of selfishness, but of spiritual maturity. So, what does wise kindness look like in practice? It means offering your compassion where it can truly take root. It means setting boundaries without guilt, understanding that self-care is not self-centeredness. It means recognizing that your energy, time, and love are sacred and should be shared with those who appreciate and respect them. It means being mindful that not every call for help is genuine, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to allow them to face their own journey. As you walk this path, remember, kindness is not about saying yes to everyone. It is about choosing the right moments, the right people, and the right ways to give. Compassion, when paired with wisdom, becomes a force that uplifts rather than depletes, that strengthens rather than weakens, that nurtures rather than drains. So do not stop being kind, but start being wisely kind. Be the steady lantern, not the burning candle. Offer your generosity with care, protect your peace, and walk your path with both an open heart and a discerning mind. When you do this, your kindness will no longer be a burden. It will be a source of true liberation. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to join our community. Subscribe to this channel and continue exploring the profound wisdom of Buddhist philosophy applied to everyday life. Together, let's cultivate kindness with wisdom and create a more balanced, compassionate world.